Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is October 3rd. My name is Mr. Burgess, and if you're here in America, you are living through the great government shutdown of 2013. Many of you may have woken up Tuesday morning and looked at the news, looked on Facebook, called a friend, and saw all the big headlines for government shutdown and said, "What? What does that mean? OMG! I have no idea what that means. Where is Mr. Burgess to explain this to me?" Well, have no fear. I am here to help you understand what all this means for you and for our country. One important thing to know early on is that this is not the first time this has happened. If you look at our most recent history, there have been 17 shutdowns since 1970. The biggest one was from December 1995 to January 1996. That was a 21-day shutdown, again fighting over the budget. So this is not a new occurrence for our country. You may also have to ask, how did this happen? How did we get to this? What is so screwy with our government? Well, to understand that, you have to realize that the fiscal year for the government starts on October 1st. And on October 1st, we need a new budget. There has to be a new budget for the country or else we shut down. The problem is budgets are really, really hard to pass. They get very political, and it's very difficult for a budget to pass that everyone can agree on. So typically what they've done in the past years is that they have passed what's called a continuing resolution, a CR. And that is a budget that simply takes the budget from last year, typically adds a little bit to it, and keeps the government running for the time being. The problem this time is that the House, which is Republican-controlled, tied the CR to Obamacare. Their big goal is they wanted to either defund Obamacare or they wanted to delay its implementation for a full year. Well, they sent that CR with those attachments to it to the Senate, which is Democrat-controlled, and the Senate said, okay, and they took all that stuff out about Obamacare and sent it back, and it went back and forth, back and forth. House wanted to get rid of Obamacare, Senate said no, and ultimately they couldn't agree, so at the stroke of midnight on September 30th, there was no compromise, and thus no government. The government shut down. But that's not entirely true because there are still significant portions of the government that are still actually running. And you may have seen that on the news, on TV, whatever. Not everything is shut down in the government. So what is actually shut down? Parts of government related to discretionary spending or what they quote-unquote call non-essential services. And this is a short list. These are all examples that constitute a very, very short list of the massive parts of government that have been shut down or furloughed during this process. Currently, no E-Verify for employers, so if you're looking to hire new employees, there is no way to check their immigration status. No financial regulators for Wall Street. No WIC, that's Women, Infant, and Children. Those are supplements and subsidies for poor mothers and their children. Disrupted VA benefits. VA, that we're talking about veterans there, so veterans hospitals and so on. Their benefits have been curtailed. Regulatory agency shutdowns like the EPA. The EPA is working on a skeleton crew right now, so great time to pollute. Woohoo! Not a good time to go to Washington, though. National parks and museums, for the most part, have been shut down, from actual national forests to the Smithsonian Museum. No urban housing vouchers and no NASA. NASA is working on a skeleton crew. The only people that are still working are those making sure the International Space Station doesn't blow up. Most of these workers, all these workers that are working for these agencies and departments and so on, the ones that didn't make the list, they have been furloughed. Typically, what that means is they have been sent home with no pay, or in some cases they're still working, they just realize that they're not going to get a paycheck. Depending on what media sources you listen to, that number of workers is either plus or minus right around 800,000 people. So 800,000 people that normally would be working are not currently because of this government shutdown. There are significant portions of the government that aren't shut down, that are still operating and working for you. Yay, the American citizen. Parts of government related to non-discretionary spending and what unquote essential services are still working for you. And again, this is a short list of those services that are still working. Typically anything related to national security. Military personnel are still on duty. And the only reason they're getting paid is because a separate compromise bill was passed and signed between Congress and the President, and that was passed right before the government shut down. So thankfully the troops, the sailors, all military personnel will continue to be paid for their service. The Border Patrol will still continue to patrol the borders. The TSA is still there to frisk you in case you're going on a flight anytime soon. Other permanent programs are still going. Social Security, yay, Grandma will still get her Social Security check. Yay, Social Security! Medicare, Medicaid, if you're injured, those programs will still help support you. Unemployment benefits will continue, and SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, more commonly known as food stamps, those are still currently being funded. Measures related to public safety. The federal prisons are still operating. They didn't just release all the crazies in the country. The FAA air traffic controllers are still on the job, making sure that planes aren't crashing into each other. Meat inspectors, the FDA, they are still inspecting most meat products. Not all meat products, but most. Independently funded organizations and agencies, part of the government. The post office is still continuing, so you will continue to receive junk mail, hooray. And the Federal Reserve is still chugging along to make sure our banks are operating. So you may ask, okay, so we know some parts of the government are open, some parts aren't. Why should I care? Well, if you live here in Virginia, this is having a huge detrimental impact on our economy. And I stress this, a huge, huge portion of Virginia's economy is related to government spending, particularly through military bases and the support personnel that work there, and then defense contractors. And the two biggest areas that are affected by this, Nova, Northern Virginia, and Hampton Roads, our local area. So if you live in those two areas, you are going to see some of the worst impacts in the entire country. Think about these people that work at these military bases, and of course the troops are still being paid, thank goodness. But think of all the defense contractors. Most people, they directly know somebody who works for one of the shipyards around here. Many of them have been furloughed. And then think of everything that they buy. If they are continuing to be out of work, good luck making a house payment, good making rent. Good luck with a car payment, groceries, everything that they buy is going to be taking a ripple effect from this government shutdown. We also see a sad part of this, but even though Virginia is so heavily affected, many parts of the country are not going to be seriously affected, and so they're not going to be too concerned about this government shutdown, despite the impact that it's having on Virginia. Now, your Burgess prediction for this whole shutdown is that this is not going to be quick, because there is not a big push for compromise. The Republicans and Democrats have drawn their lines in the sand, their battle lines, so to speak. The Republicans say no Affordable Care Act, no ACA, no Obamacare. Democrats say yes to the Affordable Care Act, yes to Obamacare. And they are not backing down from their respective positions. What we're going to see, though, is that the shutdown will become a side issue compared to the battle leading up to the really important date, October 17th. And on October 17th, why this date is so important, why it is so scary, is that the U.S. is going to hit the debt ceiling and we will ultimately default on our bills. Certain bills will not be paid by the U.S. government, which is a bad thing. What it can lead to is economic catastrophe. And the problem is we just don't know how big of an economic catastrophe this will be, because this has never happened before. This could send us back into recession, or it could be, the second Great Depression. What the Treasury is ultimately going to have to do if this happens, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, raise the legal limit of what we can borrow, the Treasury is going to have to start deciding which bills to pay. So, do we send Grandma her Social Security check, or do we pay off our Chinese debt obligations? It's going to be a tough choice. So you may be asking, well, I don't know much about politics. I don't understand government. What exactly can I do, Mr. Burgess? Obama sucks. Congress sucks. I just don't know what to do. Well, there's one big thing you can do. You can call or email your congressman, or if you're more involved in social media, most of the time congressmen have Facebooks, congressmen have Twitters, and you can blow up their accounts. If you are local, if you're here in Virginia, these three individuals would be the best outlet for your thoughts. Your House representative locally is Randy Forbes. He's a Republican. In the Senate, we have Mark Warner and Tim Kaine, and they're both Democrats. And so that, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, is your government shutdown and how it's impacting you. Good luck surviving it if it is impacting you, and have a great day.